Hey guys, in this video, we're going to be talking a little bit about what happens at the closing table, a little bit pre-closing, at closing, post-closing. So if you like the video, take a minute and like the video, please. Don't forget to go over and join our YouTube channel. If you got any questions, just comment below. We'll do our very best to answer those for you. So, by the way, first time out of the chute, you're closing a property, you have no idea what to expect. But once you've done 5, 8, 10, 20 of these things, you become an old hat at it because most of the time things are pretty consistent through a standard real estate closing. But when you're getting ready to buy or sell a home, you get a contract signed, you submit that to the closing agent, typically a title company. What do? Well, they open what's called a file, and then they order up a commitment. That's where they're doing the search on the property to find out what liens may affect that home, who's the actual owner of record that's filed in the county clerk's office, things of that nature. They get that back in, and then they go through it, and they do their best to clear title. And what I mean by clearing title is this. You've got different schedules on a commitment. Of course, the Schedule A here in Texas tells you who owns the property, gives you the legal description. Pretty easy. Our Schedule B in Texas goes through items that are going to remain on the property, not be removed. These could be things such as easements that exist for utilities or whatever it might be, ingress, egress easements that have been filed of record. Maybe it's an oil and gas lease or something that was reserved years and years ago down the road, or other items. It's always worth just taking a moment and glancing through those to make sure you're familiar with those issues, because those are staying with you on that property that you're buying. Then you go to Schedule C, which is really the biggie, in the title world. And these are the things that we want to cure or clear. The most important ones are existing mortgage liens that are going to be paid off at closing. We want to know what those are, make sure we get payoffs, and ensure that those are paid off at the closing table, so when you're buying that property, you know that all those items are removed. The other thing you're going to run into on that Schedule C is things such as judgment liens or child support liens. Maybe that seller had some issues down the road with the IRS and they've filed what's called a Notice of Federal Tax Lien, or an FTL. Well, we want to know what those are, know how to handle them properly, know how to remove them properly, so that when you're buying that home, if you're not buying it under some creative finance basis, but you want to ensure all those things are removed so that you know you're buying the home free and clear of all those issues. You're getting what is called fee simple title to the property. And if you're borrowing money from a lender, a private lender, hard money lender, institutional lender, DSCR lender, whatever it might be, they're going to be in first lien position on that property. So once you do all that, the title company is going to go through, clear those items out for you. And if you have a lender, they're going to provide this information to your lender as well, so they can prepare their paperwork for you. Now, when time comes for your closing and before the closing, the key there is before closing. If you want to review the paperwork you're going to be signing, ask to do so. Ask your lender to provide that to you, or the title company to get it to you. Please don't ask your title company to let you review those documents at closing. They will shoot you dead on the spot, because it could take 5 minutes or 5 hours to go through and do that. And they don't have time to have you review the paperwork once you're set and ready for closing. Now, it's also important to get a copy of your settlement statement. It could be a standard HUD-1 if you're buying the property as an investment, let's say. But let's say you're buying it as an owner-occupied property or selling it that way. It's going to be called a closing disclosure. HUD-1s are pretty simple, 2 pages long. A closing disclosure, about 6 pages long, and it combines, of course, the HUD-1 into that equation. It combines the truth in lending and loan estimates into the equation. It's gotten really complicated today, but it walks you through everything. And you want to take the time before closing to review that to make sure things fit what you expect and anticipate. Look at those documents also before you get to the closing table and sit down. So if you have any changes, you can get them made. Now guys, if you're using a mortgage lender, the great odds are you're not changing anything in those documents. Private lenders, maybe. Hard money lenders, maybe, but probably not also. So just understand that there's some things you just can't change or control because it is what it is when you're borrowing money. What you want to be looking at is making sure things like your loan amount, the interest rate, your monthly payment, those kind of common sense things are what it is you agreed to. Now, when you come to the closing table, you're going to meet with the escrow officer, and they're going to briefly walk you through the paperwork. And understand this, guys, escrow officers are not your lawyer. They don't represent you in any way, form, or fashion, and they cannot give you legal explanations of what it is you're doing or what you're signing. So, of course, if you have those kind of questions, get them answered ahead of time. You're not going to get them answered at the closing table. Here in Texas, for instance, our escrow officers aren't allowed by the Department of Insurance to give you those kind of explanations. And they just can't do it. They can give you basics, a settlement statement. Well, this is your financial outline of your transaction. Easy. The promissory note or real estate lien note. Well, this is your promise to pay. That's about all they can do. They can't go into detail. They can't explain provisions in there to you. That's why there are lawyers. And as I said earlier, escrow officers aren't lawyers. So please understand that. It'll make your life a lot easier when you walk into that room. So once you get in there, they're going to do a brief explanation. They're going to have you sign everything. They're probably going to notarize everything for you as well. Make sure you come with your driver's license, passport, viable forms of identification form so they can properly notarize your paperwork and get you in, get you out pretty quick. And if you do those kind of things, your time at the closing table will be short and sweet because the last thing you want to do is sit there all day long signing a simple closing. Now, I do find it kind of funny that when you've done this as long as I have, you kind of rate your businesses of people who close these deals, from worst to best. And guys, let me just tell you what, the worst person in the title business to close is another lawyer. Oh my goodness. They think they need to read everything, look at everything, comment on everything. Can't do it. The next worst is an engineer. Engineers, they kind of walk around looking at the floor and their ankles all day long. Their heads are down in the paperwork, crunching numbers. They're kind of the same way. It's kind of interesting. And I hate to say this, but I got the top two because I'm both a lawyer and an engineer. So imagine that for a minute. The third worst that I came across was a military officer because they're so regimented in what they do along the way. And all those top three, they always got down and they just scrutinized everything, it seems like. And I find this last one kind of funny. It's only happened a few times, but it's a musician. And you go, are you kidding me? Oh my gosh. I'm not sure if it's a music thing or if they write music or what it is exactly, but detailed in some formats. So, we in the industry kind of rate who our clients are out there and how it is to deal with them along the way. So once you get through all that, guys, you're at the closing table, you're signing things, as I said, you're signing that settlement statement we already talked about. You're signing any mortgage, a note and a deed of trust, maybe with your lender. The seller is going to sign a deed. You may sign what is called an affidavit of debts and liens. That's from a seller to a buyer saying, hey, these are the liens on the property that are remaining, or they're all paid off, one or the other. And that seller is verifying that for you so you know that there's not going to be anything else out there. They have other documents such as a tax proration agreement between the seller and the buyer, where property taxes oftentimes are prorated on the settlement statement. For instance, if you're closing on July the 1st, the seller may give you 6 months of taxes that go into your account. You get that money because at year end, you hold the entire year of taxes out there along the way. There's going to be an attorney disclosure letter from your lender. So they would have used some law firm, could be a random document prep firm, that prepared the paperwork for you. And they prepared that paperwork pursuant to the instructions that they were provided out there. That letter simply says that they don't represent you as your attorney. They just prepared the paperwork pursuant to the terms of the contract and the information provided to them. So pretty straightforward, pretty simple. And there's usually a slew of other basic title documents that you execute along the way. They're a boilerplate in nature. So fairly easy in that instance. But again, if you have questions about any of these things, get those questions out of the way up front as you're going through this. Now, Once you've signed all the paperwork, if you have a lender, sometimes these lenders, they want the title agent, the closing agent, to send them a copy of the settlement statement. Maybe they want to see a copy of the signed note and the signed deed of trust so they know those things got executed properly and correctly out there. Once they see that, they then issue a funding or a funding number and they wire the funds to the title company. Now, if that's the situation, no one's getting paid till at least the next day because it's going to take about a day for that wire to clear the Fed Reserve, to clear the banks, and make those funds available for distribution. On the other hand, there's a thing called table funding, and this is where the lenders usually have all they need and they have pre-funded the transaction to the lender. So once the transaction is closed, they might ask to see a copy of that settlement statement or note along the way, and they simply give the closing agent the authorization to go ahead and fund the transaction. When that happens, so long as it's not at the end of the day, you can usually get paid that day for the transaction, whether you're the seller or the buyer, whatever the case might be along the way. So just, again, having some basic knowledge of how funding works, how signing docs work, reviewing docs in advance is so important out there in this industry, and it makes you have a much better experience at closing. Now, after all of this is said and done, your settlement agent out there is going to take the documents executed and they're going to record the proper documents. For instance, if you're buying a house and paying cash, the seller is going to provide a deed and they're going to record that deed in deed records. Probably won't be anything else to record. On the other hand, if you're borrowing money from a private lender, hard money lender, bank, whatever, there's going to be a note and a deed of trust. And so they're going to record that deed of trust in deed records behind the deed, which again is there to protect your lender with that deed of trust. And then they're going to see to it that that lender gets the original promissory note you signed and copies of everything else. When the whole deal is done, they're going to scan those docs in and they're going to typically send you a scan of all the things that you executed. I would suggest probably not asking them to do a hard copy for you because that kills a lot of trees. It is so awesome in today's world to be able to scan documents in through your copy systems and be able to send that out to the buyer, the seller, the lender, as opposed to having to make copies for everybody and then sending them out by Federal Express. Now, as you go through this closing process, there's this thing called the notary that I brought up earlier about when you're executing paperwork. Well, in today's world, the mobile notary seems to be the thing of the past. Nobody wants to go into the title office to do the closing and actually sit down and do it. Some do. I still like doing that. I kind of like to know what's going on. Maybe I want to meet the seller in person if I can, those kind of items, know what's up. But oftentimes, a mobile notary is being utilized. That's where a notary will actually come to your place of business, your home, other places you might designate to close the transaction. There is also another form of notary that's just recently been approved, which is an online notary, where through the internet and through Zoom, they can watch you sign the paperwork and actually notarize that for you, allow you to use typically an electronic signature for that, which is now being accepted across the industry. And so it's just a change of the industry a little bit where you don't have to drive across town to the title company to close the deal. You may, but the mobile notary may come to you, or maybe it's that online notary as well, based upon what you're comfortable with and what you're comfortable doing. So as things advance in industry and technology and whatnot, who knows what's down the road, but it's kind of fun to see the transitioning because it used to be all paperwork, copies, closing at the title office, buyer, seller, lots of drive time, and things are changing. The winds are changing direction and things are getting easier, I think, out there along the way. So guys, I hope you found that helpful a little bit about the title closing process, how things work, what to do, what to expect, how to handle things at the closing table. And if you like this video, guys, take a minute, like the video. No, take a minute, go join our YouTube channel. Love to have you all there. If you have other questions also, please click below. We'll do our very best to get back to you. We'll look forward to seeing you all next time.